All right, hello everyone. The purpose of this video is to show you how to use some features of graphing calculators. I'm going to go over how to do some stuff with the TI, a text instrument calculator, the online application Desmos, and then I will also talk about some resources on WAMAP for some access to other online graphing calculators. Okay, so I'm going to go through doing some different things on a Texas Instrument calculator. Now, I'm going to show how to do this on a TI-84, which is just fine for this class. That'll do everything you need it to do. However, if you have a TI-89 or a TI Inspire, those will also work. Just know that they do more than we need them to do for this class. Okay. All right, so let's say that I want to graph the function f of x equals x squared. Well, the way I can do that on the TI is up here in the left-hand corner. Notice there's this y equals button. So if I click that, it takes me to a screen like this where I see a bunch of y equals lines. And if I want to do x squared, the way I can do that is, first of all, notice next to this alpha button here, there's a button with an x, a t, and some other variables. So if I click that, notice it puts an x into my equation there. And then because I want to do x squared, I can go 3 buttons below the alpha, and notice that is a squared button. So I get that y equals x squared there. Okay. Once I have that plugged in, I can press the graph button here on the right-hand side, and notice that that gives me my graph of f of x equals x squared, which you hopefully recognize as your quadratic toolkit function. All right, let's look at now graphing a different toolkit function. So I'm going to go back to my y equals thing. I'm going to clear out the x squared. So I'm going to press over here on the right-hand side below the arrows. There's a clear button, so I'll hit that. And then I want to graph the square root of x this time. And if you notice, the square root button here is above that squared button. It's a blue button up here, or blue symbol. So to get that, okay, so to get that button, what I'll do is I'll press the second button up here. So notice this blue button here, and then go down and hit the x squared. And notice what that did is put a square root in. And we can again press x here to get our square root of x there. Okay. And hit graph again, and now we have the square root function there, which again, hopefully you recognize that as one of our toolkits. All right, and when you're doing this, you can also graph more than one function at a time. So if I go down to the next line, I could do, say, x squared again, and graph that together with the square root function. Okay, if I needed to do something where I was comparing different types of functions. All right, but I'm going to clear out the x squared and just have the square root of x. Now, hopefully you notice that something that's a little unfortunate about this picture is there's a lot of wasted space, right? Notice that the square root function goes up and to the right, and we have these 3 squares here that have none of the graph in them. So it'd be nice to be able to get rid of those. So one way we can do that is I can click here where it says window. Okay, and I can change what appears on my inputs and output axes in my function. So I know that, for example, the domain of a square root function does not allow for any negative numbers. So for my x min value here, I don't need any negatives, so I'll start at 0. And because it's a square root function, I know I can go up as large as I want. I'm going to actually do 100 here. So my horizontal axis is going to go from 0 to 100. I also know that the output values, in this case the y values, the square root function, don't go negative, so I don't need to have any negative numbers there, so I can make that count from 0 to 10. And I'm not going to change anything else. Now when I graph my function, notice that the graph takes up the whole picture. Okay. And notice another thing, because I did 0 to 100 along the horizontal axis, there's a lot of tick marks along here, probably more than we need. So another thing we can do is, if I go back to my window here, I can still have my x values go from 0 to 100, but notice this third line says XSCL, which means X scale is counting by ones. Since we're going from 0 to 100, we really don't need 100 little tick marks. So here, rather than counting by ones, I'm going to make it count by tens. And so when I do that now, notice now there's only 10 marks along here. We have to remember that they're counting by tens, right? So this would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, so on and so forth. Okay? Now, let's say I want to get back to my standard 10 by 10 window, the one that I started with. Well, the way we can do that is if we press the zoom button here in the middle. And then notice number 6 down here says zoom or Z standard, which means zoom standard. So I can either arrow down to that and press enter, or just press 6, and it takes us back to that 10 by 10 window. Okay, so that's often helpful if you've been changing some things on the window on your calculator. Getting back to the standard window can be important. All right, another nice feature these calculators have is a table of values. So if I press second, and then notice above the graph button it says table, so if I hit that, it takes me to a table of values here. And actually, sorry, let me reset my table here so that it counts normal. Okay, so it takes me a table of values here that shows me for each input what I get as the output. And notice for this one, because we're doing the square root function, if I go into negative numbers going up, I get errors. But if I go down into the positive numbers, we get lots of good answers there. Okay, and so this can be a way if we want to check the output value of a function at a particular point, we can do that here. We can also change the table settings, which is what you just saw me do before. So if I press second, and notice above window, there's this button that says table set. So if I click that, I can choose two things. I can choose where the table starts, so I can make my table say it start at 10 instead of 0. And I can make it count by what I want it to. So I could say count by 0.01. And if I press second table again, notice now it starts at 10 and it counts by 0.01 going up. So that'd be a way if I want to see what some values are approaching, some output values are approaching as I approach a particular input value or something like that, that might be helpful. All right, now going back to the graph, some other things I want us to look at. First of all, if we wanted to say figure out output values, inputs and output values of the function by using the graph, if you hit this trace button, what it does normally is it puts a little, or you notice is a little flashing icon there that we can then use to trace along the graph to figure out some of the values. So notice here it's at the bottom telling us for different x values what the y values are. And we could go over to say something like close to 2 and see what the output value is, and that would tell us what the square root of 2 is. Now sometimes it's really hard to see what's going on. So rather than stick in this window here, once we have our icon in a certain particular place, we can press the zoom button. And notice number 2 here says to zoom in, so we can press that, and then wherever we have our little clicker, if we press enter, it'll zoom in on that so we can see better what has happened, what is going on. Okay, and that could be useful if we want to say find the intersections of two functions. So let's say rather than just having y equals square root of x here, I also put in a constant function, y equals 2, which if you recall, that's going to be a horizontal line at the output value of 2. And so I can go ahead and graph that. Notice we have that. And notice now that I've zoomed in, it might be a little bit easier to see where those two things intersect. All right, so I could go along here and tracing. It looks like it's at the 0.42-ish. If it's hard to tell, I can zoom in again. See what's going on. And it looks like, yeah, we're pretty close to the 0.42 there. Okay. All right, so those are just some basics of using a TI-84. Now there is another program that I mentioned called Desmos that looks like this. So if you go to desmos.com, it'll take you to a page like this. Click here where it says Graphing Calculator. And it takes you to kind of a more interactive version of a graphing calculator. So here, if I wanted to say graph square root of x, I could do something like f of x equals square root of x. And notice now it'll graph that function for me. What's nice for this is to set the window. You can do it a little bit more dynamically. You can drop and drag. You can zoom in. If you press the graph settings here, you can change the window yourself kind of right away. So I can make this say 0 to 1, make it count by 0.1. I could change the y-axis to go from, say, 0 to 1 as well. And then we get a kind of a different look on the graph. Okay. And so this one is one that if you kind of mess around with it, you can figure out some more about how it works. And I encourage you to do that. All right, finally, if you do not have access to a graphing calculator at home, Desmos is one fine option to use. Also on our class WAMAP page, if you scroll down to course information and open that, and then notice there's a folder within here that says online graphing calculators that has links to 4 other graphing calculators that you may want to check out. Well, one of them is Desmos, so it has a link to 3 others. Okay, but please do reach out to myself at the SI if you have any questions about using these or how to use the calculator that you have. Okay, thanks for watching.